has 5 minutes for a direct response.
I didn't have anything else written. That's a lot to think about. I'm not actually sure that we disagree on one element. I've actually had a lengthy debate on the transcendental argument for the existence of God, and shocked the opposition by agreeing with the initial points about the nature of logical absolutes. So when it comes to truth, I don't know that we're necessarily on completely different pages. I will say, though, that the idea that the derivative nature of morality, to say that we would not know killing is wrong had it not been delivered purportedly to Moses, is something that and not to be offensive, but I just find it absurd. As if somebody needed, I mean, did these people before God delivered that to Moses, did they not understand the consequences of killing another person and how that might be wrong? The idea that people could not comprehend that our actions have consequences, and those consequences have more consequences, that we don't live in a vacuum, that what I do affects each and every one of you. And we understand this when it comes to ideas about liberty, whether the right to swing my arm into your nose type of thing. But what we have to understand is that as you need nothing more than multiple individuals trying to share resources and subsisting together, any interaction, in order to reach these conclusions. The idea that people couldn't have realized that killing was wrong. I would argue that even the Bible contradicts that, in that when Cain slew Abel, clearly he knew it was wrong. This was long before anything had been delivered to Moses, and I'm sure that there is, some internally consistent response to that. But cultures independent of the ancient Israelites had come to these, conclusions on their own. Now, where they fit on the timeline is, up for debate. And I'm not a historian, so I won't even address that. When we're talking about truth and the fact that truth has to exist independent of our knowledge of it, yes, that's true. And in a metaphorical sense, I have no objection to the idea of a transcendent category of existence, or something along those lines. I'll agree that light, which is physical, agrees independent of our ability to actually observe it. And if every mind in existence right now ceased to exist, this podium, as far as we can tell, this reason would lead us to believe that it would still be what it is. There would be nobody to observe it. And when we discover things in the universe, this is a process of inquiry and investigation where we have discovered something. And the existence of that thing is independent of our ability to perceive it or understand it. I mean, it's not like you didn't exist before we met today. And I would think that it would be preferable to view this nebulous idea of truth as an emergent property of the natural state of the universe, much in the same way that we can view consciousness as an emergent property of the brain, or wet as an emergent property of water. How many molecules do you need before you have wet? What is wet? This is something that's incredibly difficult to grasp, and then that's not just a pun. I mean, the idea of how much of this do you need? The sand paradox, how many grains of sand do you have to pull before there's not a pile? The pile is conceptual. Wet, though, is not conceptual. Wet is a physical interaction, and that's the key. That what we're talking about when we talk about morality is the interaction. And my contention is that you need nothing more than any two individuals who are interacting, who are thinking, reasoning beings, empathetic to one another, understanding the consequences of their action, to develop a moral system. It's not difficult to determine that life is generally preferable to death, pleasure is generally preferable to pain, and that there are exceptions to these, particularly when those core values or those core foundational points interact, that it may be a case where death may be preferable to life when pain is so much greater. I don't know. I'm not here to necessarily assert moral positions on when euthanasia might be allowed or if it's ever allowed. I'm saying that those values arise as emergent phenomena in the interactions of thinking beings.
You know, I did not say killing is wrong because we know killing is wrong because Moses came down from the mountain. And understand that as narrative, okay? I'm not a biblical literalist, I'm not a fundamentalist at all. But I do believe that narrative is the ground of culture. I don't even believe philosophy is the ground of culture, okay? And I'm not a historicist, although I love history. I believe that narrative is the ground of culture. And I believe that truth enters the world through a word when it's spoken. In the beginning, God spoke the world into existence. That's my presupposition. Okay, and I'll tell you that. And that's why I think debates like this are very, very important. And killing is not wrong because the narrative says that God disallows killing. Okay? I think I agree with Matt in some fundamental ways where we end up in a different place. I think that in the astonishingly complex and often tragic interaction between human beings, certain moral principles can be distilled. I agree with that 100%. And that's why I also believe that sometimes morality is unclear. What we believed yesterday might not exactly hold today. But there are some foundational and fundamental truths that I think are so self-evident, even to those who believed in gods other than the God of Abraham, or those who believe in no gods at all, that they can still be discerned. I have no problem with that. I think that's why you see similarities in different religions. I think that's why the atheist, I still hold to the fact that the atheist can make no ultimate transcendent appeal beyond his own personal authority, which is to say beyond his own experience. Even the atheist can still discern some of these fundamental precepts. They're written into the very fabric of the universe, number one, speaking as a Christian. Number two, they're corroborated in the interactions with people. But what I'm talking here is, where is the fundamental authority, where is the fundamental seal that says, yes, this violates the ultimate moral prohibition. This is a moral line that ought not to be crossed. Here's the problem that I have with atheism, not with Matt. I like a lot of what Matt says, actually. A whole lot. I think, I could go grab a beer with Matt. I really could. I really could, and we could enjoy it. We'll just put the God question aside. How's that? Okay? All right? The problem is that the atheist experiment, especially in this last century, I don't hold him responsible. I don't hold a lot of atheists responsible, so I'm not making a moral judgment here. Please understand me. The problem is that the atheist experiment, especially with eugenics and communism and so on and so forth, I'm not saying that all atheists are eugenicists. I'm not making that. But the real reason those moral lines were crossed, and the corrective to the crossing of those lines, did not come from within atheism, but from outside of it. It's because it cannot and does not hold any other claim to authority besides its own experience. Now, Matt said that truth is an emergent property of the universe. That's a very, very recent claim, okay? I hold to an older tradition, and that is that truth exists in the universe, but it needs to be uncovered. It doesn't emerge. Now, that's not to say that all Christians did truthful things. Clearly, some did not. And it's not to say that what we hold as true is necessarily as developed as it might be. But it does say that truth is not emergent and contingent on our own experience, but again, and make the transcendent argument, that truth as a separate category of being actually sits in judgment of what we do. It doesn't follow that someone who says, I have the truth, does indeed have the truth. That doesn't follow. When someone says, I have the truth, I go, oh yeah? Let's see. I'll listen, I'll think. Okay, and I expect to be challenged in the same way. it does say that truth as a separate category of being, okay, requires, in the end, our wrestling with it and submission to it. Now, here's where I differ with the atheist, is that I don't believe either.
Perhaps 30 more seconds?
Oh, 30, sorry, I wasn't watching, okay. Truth, I think, too, has it's not only, I talk of it as a category of being, but I also think that truth has a personal dimension. I'm a Christian. But truth is not something you see. Truth is something, first, you hear.